While creating this, I try to do it digitally. I couldn't do it digitally because I need to see it and I need to write it so that it can absorb into my brain. So in my vision, I guess, for the concept map is I have the child in the center, and the child slash children, the stalitkas, are like the center of the flower because they essentially grow into their little flowers. I say that all the time because that's how my great grandmother, used to talk about us as children. There are flowers. They're precious. Um, we essentially groom our children and to grow into really strong people. Or maybe I think of this as like the flower on a tree, because one of the teachings that my grandmother gave me was when I had my first son. She said, when you bath your son, you don't throw out the water, you don't drain the water. You take that bucket of water and you go and you pour it onto the base of the tree, because your son is going to grow up strong and tall, she said. So that's how I always think of my children, is they're growing into strong, tall, I don't know, but he's not super tall, but he is tall. So I have the child in the center, and then I have the circle of courage around it, because the circle of courage theory is it's indigenous based, but also it includes all of the elements of us as Huilnuk people, us as First Nations people, because it's got generosity, belonging, mastery, and independence, and those are like the 4 quadrants that I put here. And I have, so I'll start with belonging. Our word for belonging is shishuk, and it's English, I guess, translations like it's you're hooked into something. So when a child feels that they belong to, this is mainly used for like our cultural ceremonies, but that's the word that I related to belonging, because you're hooked into something. It's to build a connection with the students and create a safer environment. I also have psychological safety in here. When the learning environment is deemed safe by the learner, enough for them to take a risk. I also have constructivism in there as well. A person learns by mentally organizing and reorganizing new information. So I put that in this quadrant, as well as the SDT theory, relatedness, the need to feel connected or involved with others. So that kind of is included in this quadrant. Generosity. So Shwali Ikwan is it's in the center of both of these 2 quadrants, because it means both good and generous people. So in our cultural ceremonies, we are always taught that we have to feed everyone and give everything away when we're doing cultural ceremonies, so that they have something to remember the ceremony that they just witnessed. So we have I have that in this quadrant here, as well as the whole child is nurtured by concern for others. I have a purpose in life. So I always feel that our children need to know, like, they need to identify with who we are, where we come from, and when a child is truly like nurtured, they're shown the generosity of the teachings of the, I guess, the time and the attention to give them those teachings, because we know that in the future they are going to give those teachings as well. So in a classroom setting, that would be one of my main things, is to teach identity. And I put SDT in here as well because each of the other quadrants have that kind of generosity built into these areas, but it doesn't necessarily say generosity in the description of SDT. The largest one I have in here is Indigenous theory. So we live in a good way, where you're trained to be like really hardworking. We learn from place, so the land, the oceans, everything teach us to know where you are, where you come from, and who you come from. So I just said that earlier. And we connect to the land, the water, the animals, and our spirit. So everything is connected through spirit in our indigenous theory or indigenous ways of teaching. We teach with kindness and thankfulness. We have a tradition of honoring and witnessing gifts to acknowledge the people and to pass down history. So our history and everything is passed down through our indigenous teachings. So mastery, independence. I have here, I wrote it down on the card because it's upside down. So free will, increased responsibility, and I have purpose. So that's like the part about like the circle of courage. And then under SDT, I have autonomy. So the need to feel free of external constraints on behavior. So that's like the SDT component. And then I also have elements of effective cooperation. Individuals feel accountable to others in the group, so they pull their own weight and contribute. Those kind of elements are in this quadrant. And in this one is mastery. So Dr. Martin Brokenleg says, like, when you give until you can't give anymore, is when you know that you've mastered the like full circle. So you feel like the belonging, and you've given and received, and like the generosity portion, and you're learned to be like independent. So like mastery is like you've given it like basically your all, and yeah, so that's the mastery part. And a child has a thirst for knowledge and can cope, and to say that I can do it. So that's this quadrant here. So I have constructive competition, indigenous theory, and the SDT, competence, the need to feel capable or skilled. So that's the SDT portion that goes into this quadrant here. So constructive competition, withholding effort, so one's failure can be attributed to not trying instead of one's incompetency. And an indigenous theory, I added in here. Transformation is another basic teaching or value that we hold sacred. Once we begin to know and understand that we are connected, respect all living beings, we begin to communicate with all living beings. All living beings. So it's like the reciprocity of everything. I have the ones that I didn't know, like not know, but I was trying to figure out which area the constructivism theory fits into. I want to say well, no, I already put it in belonging, so that it's here in belonging. The zone of proximal development I have in here as well. And then these ones are going to be just connected to here. So the behaviors theory, we talked about this in class, and the behaviors theory is the use of like reward and punishment, and I don't know if it necessarily like translate into English for like that theory, but we talked about how the behaviors theory is also like an indigenous theory for in some way, shape, or form, because when we are being trained in our indigenous ways to receive a gift from our family, and it goes with like education stuff as well. So I want to say that I understand this behavior because and it's, I guess, the way that I can relate to teaching. It's like I told the story about the marbles in the jar for my 5th grade teacher, and we had to complete our work and then hand it in, and then we had the marbles that we put into the jar. And also in Indigenous theory, there's a certain way that you have to carry yourself individually, and in order to receive the gift. So you have to belong to you have to belong in the lineage to say Suihue. Suihue, I explained in one of my other classes, is like the mass dance. So you have to belong to that lineage, and then you have to be able to give. You have to have that generous quality, and then you have to show that you're like basically putting in the work to learn about the gift that you're receiving. Mine is I have to give back, so I have to attend gatherings for Squaikwe, and I have to learn that I have to be independent in learning the stilam, the songs, to certain families who ask me to sing for them. So I have to give my time, give my practice time, be there at the gathering, and then I have to like learn how to master the song. So I have to each song is individual, or not individual, but it's, yeah, you have to belong. Each family has a song, sorry. So I connect strongly with like the behaviors theory. It's not necessarily like reward and punishment, but it's like